a number of years ago, I went to see Sarah perform in London. We overlapped in London, and she was playing at this historic, incredible church. And I had to drop something off at the start of, or before the show in your green room. And I was running late, so I felt bad, like imposing just before the performance. And Sarah looked at me and said, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. Before you go, I just want you to meet my friend John." And I turn, and there's a guy who, I don't know, I'm gonna say is in his late 60s. He looks very buttoned down, like an accountant or an investment banker. He shakes my hand. I say, "Hi, John," and then I wish you luck for your show, and I leave. I sit in the audience. The performance is great, and then Sarah says, "For some of you here who've been following my career for a long time, you know that my first solo album was produced by a member of Led Zeppelin, who is here with us tonight, and who's been a friend and supporter for years. John Paul Jones, would you mind joining us on stage for a song?" And the frickin' accountant dude comes on the stage and just like wails and plays with Sarah, because he did produce her first solo album and has been a fan for years. And at the end of, and I'm like, oh my God. At the end of the show, I go backstage, and I'm lost backstage in the catacombs of this British church. I don't really know my way around churches. And I run into John Paul Jones, and he looks at me like, "Do you know where it is?" And before I answer, I'm like, when I said, "Nice to meet you, John," what I meant was, "Oh my God, you're a legend. It's amazing." And he chuckled, and then we spent time with Sarah. She then bailed on us and said, "You two should get to know each other a little bit," which was super generous of you. And she then like closes the door, opens it a crack, and says, "Don't trash my dressing room." And John's like, "I'm good." I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm the problem here, John." And he spent the next like 5-10 minutes just telling me what an amazing performer, artist, person you are. And I was like, "Yeah, no, I totally agree. Could we talk about Zeppelin?" Just like a little, which we did, and you came back, and it was amazing. But for those who don't know, I'll just really quickly mention that Sarah's Grammy nominations are in the double digits. 5 of those nominations have been Best Album of the Year in her category, which is a couple of different categories. One of those was a win for Best Album of the Year, and also a more recent Grammy win for Best American Roots Song with "Call My Name," which you won with your trio "I'm With Her," which was named before the Hillary Clinton campaign. And I think like we should probably talk.
We're real trendsetters, is what we are.
You are, yeah. But
trendsetters.
But like it's kind of a little atypical for you to have earlier this year recorded on a Beyonce album, and like you're on a top 10 hit song with Beyonce. And it's not necessarily in keeping with your Nickel Creek, "I'm With Her," Watkins Family Hour, Mutual Admiration Society.
Listen, fiddle is finally getting cool, and I'm here for it.
All right.
Yeah, I was on tour. I grew up in a band called Nickel Creek that is been touring last year, still touring, and while like leaving for tour for like a 3.5-week tour, I got a text from a friend who was like, "Hey, super down low. I'm recording a Beyonce song. Can you like record it?" Like, "No, I'm leaving town today. Please. I'm so sorry. This is terrible." And then like a week later, I got a text from another friend who was like, "Hey, I'm recording a song for a Beyonce record. Can you play fiddle on it?" And I'm like, I can't say no to this twice. And so they let me overdub it on tour, but there was no like little studio option nearby. And so our dear like sound engineer who was on tour with us rallied on like the first day off in 5 days and set up a little situation in a really basic hotel room, and we just recorded on these like crummy microphones, and it kept breaking, and we'd like restart, like we had like the wrong attachments for the gear that he had, and it was it took way longer than it needed to because we didn't have the right equipment, but it worked. And so now I play fiddle on a Beyonce song. My brother plays guitar on it, and it's wild. But and that like song came out like 3 weeks later, which is not normal. Usually like you record stuff and then you sit on it for like 3 to 6 months and then it gets released. And this was like the first single was released before the album was finished, which is, who would think that Beyonce does stuff differently than all of us? But evidently she does.
And speaking of people who do things differently than all of us, you and Nickel Creek also did a duet, I guess it's not really a duet, with Dolly Parton that you recorded sometime ago.
Yeah, years ago, so Dolly's career was crazy, gangbusters, and then like she had a dip in popularity when she got like in the late 80s, 90s or something, and she went back to her roots and did a couple of bluegrass albums, which ended up being this nice thing. And we got to do some stuff with her. It was really, really cool. And she sang these beautiful scratched vocals that were just gorgeous, and I was so blown away. She showed up at the studio when we were recording, just totally dollied out, dressed to the nines, 4-inch heels at like 10:30 in the morning, and it was amazing. Amazing.
And
yeah.
You were like 8 years old when you started Nickel Creek.
I was 8, Chris was 8, and my brother was 12. And it was just like a kids band, like, hey, can a kids band open this bluegrass festival in Southern California? And we knew each other because we were all taking lessons from the same teachers. And then we just kept going, like that happened. And then we're like, great, what are we doing next weekend? And it just kept going. So I've been in this band since I was 8, and it's wild and awesome. And every once in a while, like once or twice every tour, we're just like, this is crazy that we're still doing this. And it's rewarding and challenging still, and really fun, and good nights and bad nights still, and it's exciting.
And you also did a departure from what you normally do, and early in the pandemic, you did a children's album.
Yeah,
which is beautiful.
Thank you. I had my daughter in 2017, and found myself. I had, over the years, collected vinyl in record stores for some reason. I was just like getting these old vintage like Disney records that have like gorgeous books and with pages and beautiful pictures and stories. And so I had collected these like various things like Star Wars, but also like Winnie the Pooh, and with Sterling, what's his name? Sterling Shepard or something like that, who does the voice for Winnie the Pooh, the good voice. And these vinyls were just gorgeous, and they're beautiful to look at. And my daughter was 2, and she was really into it at the time. So then we ended up spending like the first year of the pandemic, a lot of what she did was just like look at these pictures, this gorgeous artwork, and listen to the stories on the record. And it was heartwarming and gorgeous. And listening to a lot of those songs, I was reminded of a lot of the music that I grew up with in my childhood that aren't necessarily children's songs. Some of them are, but some of them are just part of the fabric of my younger years. And so I made a record of songs designed to put kids to sleep. Side A is designed strategically to put kids to sleep, as well as side B. You can choose your own adventure, but it's fun. It's like a lot of beautiful old classics and one original song.
And you also, so it's interesting to think about the variety in what you do, because you're such an extraordinary vocalist. The Americana Music Honors and Awards, you won Instrumentalist of the Year. You've been a violin virtuoso since you were a kid. which is how you end up opening bluegrass festivals at the age of 8. And you also now play more guitar, and you're a really accomplished songwriter. Is there a context in which you feel most at home? Do you feel...
Definitely fiddle. Definitely fiddle. I feel like for fiddle, for me, I find myself, I'm not one of those people that like has to play every day. At all, but I do notice that like that there is an itch that gets scratched by practicing fiddle that I don't get with anything else, because I think just because I'm not fluent in it, but enough that that like I can lose myself in the process of practicing it, where there will be something that I'm going after, like a transition or a solo or some kind of moment that I'm trying to go after, and I can lose myself I can lose track of time and just be thinking about, just do the corrections and do the repetition and just lose hours that way. And it's a lovely feeling in my brain when that happens. It's just the only way that I can really get that. Very, very satisfying. And I'm so grateful to have a way to access that in my current life.
That's so great. And all right, so tell us, you just recorded the tracks for an album that won't come out for a while. You want to tell us anything about that?
Yeah, my band, I'm with her, with two of my dear friends and two of my favorite musicians, Sarah Giroux and Aoife O'Donovan. And we recorded it over the course of we wrote it. We had 2 to 4 day writing retreats for the last 2 years, where we would meet up somewhere and just try and crank out 3 songs or 4 songs, and work through it. It was really, really fun, and recorded it in a couple of different installments. Upstate New York, we finished it, and I haven't heard it yet. We left the studio with no rough mixes, no version of the songs, and we're just waiting to hear the first mix, and it's starting to get a little. It needs to happen. I'm really excited to hear it. We're really proud of the songs, and yeah.
That's great. All right, so we can catch the rest of the Nickel Creek tour for the album Celebrants, which is amazing and so beautifully written, which is why it was nominated for Best Folk Album of the Year. And we can maybe see you soon with I'm With Her, and we can catch you at Largo in LA doing Watkins Family Hour. Do you want to explain quickly what Watkins Family Hour is?
Yeah, Watkins Family Hour. My brother is in the band Nickel Creek. We grew up playing together in that band, and then also between Nickel Creek tours, back in the day, we were early 20s, we were touring 3 weeks on and 1 week off for 3 years, and it was a lot, and we got pretty burned out of it. And in that 1 week off, Sean and I started doing a residency at this really great club in Los Angeles called Largo, which at the time was a 120-seat little dinner club, terrible food, but incredible music and comedy, and with a rich culture. And so we got to jump into that culture and do a monthly show. And we've been doing it mostly monthly for 23 years now, and when we're not on tour. And it's always different with whatever musicians are around, and it's a really special thing. And I don't always want to do it because sometimes you're just home for 10 days and just don't want to do it. But we always have one on the books, and every time it happens, I'm just this is the best, because it's a great excuse to get together with musician friends. It's really the only time that I see a lot of these people who have become integral to my life. And so that just happens when we're home in LA. But if you live in LA, you might know about Largo, or you should. It's a great place.
Or you can check out one of the 3 full-length albums that Watkins Family Hour has put out as well. But having been to see you at Largo, it is an amazing
it's a cool vibe.
Really intimate experience. All right, so thank you so much for being here. You're going to play fiddle and guitar and sing and all of those things a little bit later,
Yep.
which I hope people will stick around for. Don't even try to talk to me while that's happening. No, that's not a joke. Don't even try to talk to me while that's happening. And thank you so much for being here. I think you first did something with us for Venture Crush in 2012 or 13.
Yeah, I think that's right. In
And
California.
it's been amazing to just have you in our orbit and lives.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Sarah. We said that we would talk a little bit about venture, though you now realize that all of you are an excuse for us to hear Sarah Watkins perform. But we should probably still talk a little bit about venture. Meredith, do you want to start on that?
Sure. And we didn't talk about this in prep, but Tatiana and I had the pleasure of, I would say researching you, but our team did all the work and they were amazing, as I mentioned earlier. So you're a lawyer. You are a multiple-time founder with successful exits. You're an angel investor, a nonprofit founder, a fund founder, and you're an author of a book I haven't read because I don't speak French. But you've accomplished a lot, and you're a real force in the venture ecosystem, particularly in France, but not only in France. And I've been really inspired by what you've done at Sista and Sista Fund. So I'll start with this. I know you did a study in 2022, and you found, and this saddened me but did not shock me, that startups created by women were 30% less likely to be financed by major VCs. And the women founders were getting 2.5 times less. And your comment on that is that cognitive biases work against equality. 89% of venture capital fund partners are men. 50% of these funds have no women on their ICs. Human beings have an unconscious tendency to help those who are similar to them.
It's supposed to be a nice moment.
So with that as a backdrop,
Thank you for this introduction.
Today's theme is really raising rounds.
Chaos. Okay, no.
It's chaos. But it struck me that I couldn't talk to you about your experience as a founder raising rounds or as an investor investing in rounds without that backdrop of your view on the gender inequities in the space. Yeah. So with that as a background, love to hear a little bit from you about that funding background, your war stories. What are folks doing well? What are they not? And how do we get over this? Do you have the solution?
Of course.
Sure.
Music and wine. So no, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I guess that I was a lawyer, but a few years, and I decided to go to entrepreneurship because I believe that entrepreneurship is the most amazing place to be when you want to kind of change things, because you can, it's all about seeing economic opportunities in things that are not going well and finding solutions. And for me, entrepreneurship and feminism have a lot in common. So entrepreneurship, again, is identifying opportunities and not seeing the world that it is, but that it should be. And feminism is reorganizing an established order. So I recently decided to join my two patients and launch a gender fund. But before that, I guess the idea was that I started off in entrepreneurship, and I was very lucky because I sold my first company 2 years after I started it, and I sold it to a subsidiary of Amazon. So we were kind of the first French startup built by two women that had a very early and successful exit. And I thought that, from this first experience, we were 250, and I was thinking that entrepreneurship was the most incredible thing because you could be a woman, you could be young, you could raise funds, and you could do an exit in a few years. But everybody was telling me that it was much more complicated, and it was kind of very different from my own experience. So one day, very simply, I didn't do like a very fancy study. I just went on LinkedIn. I went on the venture capitalist firm's website, and I counted. I counted women in order for women to count. And I discovered, because everything was public, that only 2% of the venture in the 10 last years in France had gone to women entrepreneurs. And we had, me and my partner, taking a large series of that because we had raised 30 million, which was an important amount at that time. So I was totally shocked by the 2%, and I guess that the 2% kind of, like changed my way of thinking, and I understood that I was just a statistic error. And I just, found a way to make it, but at the same time, nobody else was making it, and that we had to do something. And that was the beginning of SISTA. So SISTA is a non-profit organization. Now it's a European organization. It's a little bit what you guys have with Always, I guess. And the idea is to try to close the funding gap. So we have 3 kind of large goals. One is helping women raise funds. We raised more than 300 million for them, with them. The other one is to try to have much more women in investing and minorities. And the other one is to work around data. We believe that data, of course, is key because it's a way of not having the cultural craziness around gender. So I know it's not very politically correct, but everybody is crazy around gender because in function of your wife, your mother, your culture, you of course have absolutely not the same point of views. So how do you make everybody, try to have a conversation? You focus on data because that's the only way to kind of cancel the noise that's going on with the culture craziness. So data is very important, but the hard thing about data is that it's very boring. So what we found is to use humor to, of course, have people listen to us. Because if you have studies, and we got the Boston Consulting Group to kind of work nonprofit for us, so we have like the most amazing studies on women entrepreneurs in Europe, and it's very fancy, but nobody reads them. So we started making like funny videos. I think the link is on the Zoom, and it worked really well. So out of the studies we made videos. So the studies, I guess, have like maybe 150, downloads, and the videos were seen more than 10 million times, which is absurd. But it's also a way to say that sometimes, in difficult subject, when nobody cares, because people make believe, they care, but at the end of the day, it's very hard, and the 2% are not changing in France and America and the rest of the world. But when you make people laugh, a little bit when, people listen to music, you open their hearts and something happens. So that was our way to kind of, try to insist on the fact that we needed more funding for women. So we started that, and it was very nice. We raised funds, but we didn't have that many venture funds that were investing in women. And the numbers were not going great, and I was really convinced that women were an amazing asset, not in a philanthropic way, just in a very performative, for-profit way. So I decided to launch my own fund. That was 2 years ago. We raised 65 million out of 100, which is huge because we're the largest venture with the gender lens criteria, I think, in the world. And it's a good and a bad news because the numbers are large and small at the same time. And that's been an amazing adventure. And since then, we invested in 7 amazing companies. And we have one of the amazing company here with Astran and Yozrat that's leading it. And it's been an amazing journey. So I guess that to answer your questions, yes, the numbers are very, very ugly and we should be ashamed of them. And at the same time, we can't do anything else than just to try to help out and make a little bit things go further. And I think that we're doing it because, again, 2 years ago, there was not that much money going for women entrepreneurs in Europe. Now there's a lot. I wrote the book to say that, of course, it was hard, but it was possible. And if I could do it, no anybody else could do it. So the book is named Entrepreneurship, A New Way of Being Feminist. And I believe so because for me, entrepreneurship is just a way for women to become a boss and to have absolutely no glass ceiling. When you start as an entrepreneur, I was 25, and I was talking to like these fancy guys that had hundreds of thousands of employees, and I had none. But I was CEO, and they were CEO, so the conversation was very different. When you start in a firm and you have all these people, all these glass ceiling, how do you break through? Isn't it a song, Breakthrough? have to break through. So just how do you do it? It's too complicated, and I didn't know how to do it. So I just decided to be my own boss very early, and I encourage all the other women to do it because I believe that it's an amazing way to redefine your own world.
And I can keep asking questions unless you want to jump in.
Well, let's come back to Tatiana and get a little bit more familiar with Lisa. Lisa, you came into General Assembly as the CEO, the first non-founder CEO there after the acquisition. General Assembly is a big brand. You had hundreds of people reporting to you at a very large education-oriented publishing firm before that. You had started your own business. You've got like all these incredible board seats, which we're going to talk about as well. But you had not really been a like startup world person with a big startup world company that like was a household name. What was that transition like coming into General Assembly?
Sure. So first, I've never actually been an opening act for a musician. So this is amazing. Now I know what it feels like. What's that? Exactly. I really have. And before we pivot to talking about me, which I will tell you is my least favorite subject, but that's a lie. But I do want to just say that two things on this topic of sort of women entrepreneurship. The statistic that I'm sure you have committed to memory, and please share if you have it off. But I do know that women-led founding teams do, like the data is in, they do outperform on average all male teams, male-led teams. So if you're just interested, just flat out in maximizing your fund returns, really invest and take a very good look at the women founders that are coming through your door. And then the second thing that I would say is for check writers, for investment decision makers, if you want to kind of counteract your own bias, and I'm not just talking about male or male check writers, but for everyone, if you want to check your own bias, one really great way to do that is really think about the questions that you're asking. There is really sophisticated research that suggests that women founders get asked questions about risk and downside, and men get asked questions about growth and TAM. And so the answers and the responses end up very, very different. And you have women forced to talk about downside and down case scenarios, whereas men get to talk about upside. So on the topic of, how do we actually start to systemically change some of these outcomes? Those are a couple of things on my mind. So your question was something General Assembly, world of startups. Okay.
And downside.
Yeah, great. Perfect. There will be no downside in this conversation. So it is true. I have been in and around both venture and PE for a very long time, but never actually on the investing side. My whole career, now approaching a 30-year career. It will be 50 on my next birthday. I'm very proud of that. I'm so excited. That the vast majority of my career, I have been an operator, a kind of career, president, GM, CEO of education companies. I get up in the morning and I have said to myself for the last almost 30 years, my mission in the world is to help companies break the trade-off between making money and making a difference. So that has really been the way that I have worked and the way that I've made professional decisions. Most of that work has been in the education space. So I have run big divisions at publicly traded companies like McGraw-Hill and Pearson. I was the first non-founder CEO of General Assembly. Big Global Boot Camp became the category defining brand in the space, which I'm happy to talk a lot about. A wonderful story. And I have been a founder and bootstrapped my way to a decent exit, but was unsuccessful at raising even $1 of venture funding. Now, this was back in the Mesozoic era, granted, where I couldn't even raise from like venture capitalists in New York. I had to haul myself across the country to go to Silicon Valley and was sort of, ringing doorbells and had a decent idea. But if I had known 1,000 years ago what I know now, right? Like now I know it was a great product idea. I was building in an area that I knew, but it was fundamentally not a venture backable idea. I hadn't done the homework and the networking to understand who was the partner at the venture firm that I was talking to and who was, and what was their investment thesis, what was the lens through which they were going to be looking at the world. And even if I had gotten all that right, the truth is, and this is actually still true, that less than 1% of venture capital goes to Black women anyway. So I was climbing up a pretty steep hill.
0.2, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, it's even worse.
That's exactly right. So I could have gotten everything right, and it probably wasn't going to happen. But like a woman operator, I did it without venture capital, and created a great company that had great money So back to venture. So the role that I hold now, I am a board partner and an operating partner at a great seed stage fund called Primary Venture Partners. We started about 11 years ago or so, and the thesis was really to belong on New York. Again, 10, 15 years ago, the entire representative universe was in Silicon Valley. It was actually really silly when the co-founders of the firm decided to kind of plant a flag in New York. Now New York is the second most important venture ecosystem in the country, in the world, but that wasn't so obvious. Then. And I have kind of watched and admired the work that they've done. And so when I decided to leave General Assembly after 3 years of a big business transformation and turnaround, I decided that look, I have inherited a venture-backed company from its founder. I've been the strategic acquirer of a number of startups and seen what it really takes to make durable businesses that had their start as a venture-backed company, and I was a founder getting a company from 0 to 1 and beyond. And having sat in that seat and seen almost every age and stage of company from 0 all the way to sort of IPO, I was really excited to work with the founders in our portfolio company to help them do all of the things, tell their story to raise capital, help them, bridge the gap between the investment case in their last round to, matching that performance, and building great teams and all of the things that you need to do to be a really, really successful founder and CEO.
And consistent with what you just talked about, I want to talk a little bit about Leadership Now and the pledge that you co-authored, for which you've won a whole bunch of awards and gotten a whole bunch of well-earned recognition. I will also throw out a data point because the paucity of funding from venture to Black women-led business doesn't happen in a vacuum. I have, since 2019, been on the board of Black Women Talk Tech, and we published research several years ago showing that 96% of Black women founders have another job. And I mention that because often people talk about having skin in the game and needing to see that you are taking risk. And I would ask that part of the recalibration that I think is necessary is if 0.2 or 0.02% of venture funding goes to Black women, then they have to have other jobs while they're starting their startup. And we have to change that dynamic from a whole bunch of perspectives in order to enable that. And that is skin in the game, to have another job. And on top of that, do the hard work of starting a company, knowing how odds-defying you must be to raise capital. So I want to talk about your pledge, and this is in 2020. And one of the things in this pledge, which is terrific, is as business people, we see a great need and opportunity for the business community to mobilize on issues of economic, social, and racial justice in new, innovative, and evidence-based ways. And I want to know if you could talk a little bit about how you feel that pledge has been impactful, has moved toward your expectations and hopes for it, and thank you for doing it.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for that. So a little context. So there is so the organization that Ed's referencing, the Leadership Now Project, it's actually a great nonprofit that gathers leaders in the business and finance community who care deeply about democracy. And if that is something, if that is a topic that animates you, if there's anybody in this room who is sort of, feeling that having a healthy, thriving democracy in this country anyway, and actually globally, is not a given. This is actually an organization that I highly recommend. Just Google it and learn more, the Leadership Now Project. It was actually started by a group of fellow HBS alignment to Harvard Business School class of 2003, and it was a group of women actually from those classes where we kind of got together and were concerned in 2016 by the influence of one HBS graduate in particular, Steve Bannon, who we felt did not necessarily represent the values of Harvard Business School alums, certainly not its women alums. And a letter was sort of, written to the Times, an editorial was written to the Times, and it begat a nonprofit to kind of fight the cause of on a nonpartisan basis, the cause of democracy. In 2020, that group, we were sort of looking at the moment that we were in at the time, the, post George Floyd, and thinking, how do we really do this? And so we created that letter, which was sort of just a set of principles. And there were others that were doing sort of pledges, but I think ours was the one that a lot of sort of CEOs at the time decided to kind of sign on to. And it was just a roadmap or a lighthouse of, if this is something that really matters to you and that you care about deeply, here are some things that you can do when you think about your employee base, when you think about the suppliers, when you think about the way that you are funding. And it did end up, I think, really inspiring a lot of folks. Now, since then, we have seen, and even back in 2020, I knew and we knew that it was the case that the whole conversation around inclusion is, it has ebbs and flows. There are moments where it has tailwinds, like in 2020. There are moments when it has headwinds, like in 2023 and 2024. And quite honestly, almost every sort of every movement toward any kind of social progress experiences those ebbs and flows. And so what I have learned, that whatever that value is that you care about, gender equality, racial equity, you've just got to decide to be on that team, whether the wind is at your back or whether you're experiencing the headwinds or the tailwinds. You just got to decide. And I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm a team gal. So these are causes that will always continue to be important to me, even when there are headwinds.
We appreciate that, and I think it is really important to stick in through the headwinds. So thank you for doing it. And
thank you. I mean, look, trust me. I think for folks. For folks in my same diaspora, for us Black folks in the room, I hope this resonates with you. But we don't always want to be the ones fighting the fight for diversity. We as women don't always want to be the ones fighting the fight for gender equality. And so, I think the reason that people of all kinds really gravitate around you, Ed, is that you walk the walk. I mean, you would never say this about yourself, but you are at least as versed in diversity. You're probably more so on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, and you really work to walk the walk of your values, and that's why it's cool to be up here with you.
Well, that's overly kind of you. I will. I will just show that I'm wearing cufflinks today that say 49 on the back because they are cufflinks supporting and from the 49th Vice President of the United States. I won't say who she is, but because that would be partisan, and I don't want to be partisan. It's one of the many women of it's one of the many women of color who's been Vice President of the United States. All right, so can we talk about venture before I get in a lot of trouble?
We may have to give some tickets back or something. Like, are we supposed to talk about funding?
Yeah. I had other questions, but let's talk about funding.
Yeah, if not, I'm going to talk about French politics, and it's not good, so.
We're having a more exciting moment, finally. But, so you're both hearing pitches, you're both evaluating companies and making investment decisions. What resonates? What are you excited about investing in right now?
It's funny because there was one of the questions that, of course, you ask when you're talking about raising funds, and I decided to ask ChatGPT because GPT in order to try to find something a little bit different to tell, and it was amazing, like the amount of good advice. So I decided not to give you that kind of advice because, of course, you can go on your own to go see, and it's kind of hard because you have so many books, so many talks. I mean, you've been doing that for a long time. I guess me too. And the knowledge available, it's just huge. I think the important thing to say is that as an entrepreneur, your life is 99% of no's and 1% of yes. 99%. And that's really hard. And I lived it for 15 years, and it's really weird now. Everybody doesn't say no anymore, so I don't know how to take it, but really 15 years of no. And it's complicated because, of course, you love, people say you rise in adversity, but that's kind of, a say. When you live it, it's kind of hard to get no's the whole time. So I guess that the first thing you have to focus on is that, of course, 99% of the VCs are going to say no, and it doesn't mean your product is not good, it doesn't mean your team is not good, it doesn't mean you're not going to build an empire. It just means that you're not the right fit for this VC. You're going to get 99% of no's on your contracts, also on your first, contract, and along the way also. And again, it's not because your product is not well, but maybe because it doesn't fit the right market. So the first thing is just to try to find the people that will help you to navigate in adversity. Because being a founder and raising funds is very, very, very hard. And in order to get there, I think you just need to double the number of failures. Somebody famous said, in order to double your success, you have to double your failure. So that's a really good advice. That's not mine, but you should definitely do it. So the first thing, I guess, is to find a network that is going to support you. We talk often about networks, and I guess that here is an amazing networking event, and it has never been that important. And I'm not talking about the LinkedIn network, but the real network is you're going to build it out throughout the time. And I think that I build my network in a very particular way because I decided that all the people who would say no to me, if they didn't want to be in a contractual relationship with me, so it was going to be another kind of relationship. If they didn't want to be in a fundraising relationship, it was going to be another kind of relationship. And you meet all these people, and you can't just take a no for an answer, because that's not who you want to be. You just have to find another way to interact. And in general, most of my network and my amazing relationship, all from people who said no to me. And I think the first advice would be, again, building your network. Don't focus on the people who said no, but when they say no, try to find a way to take that relationship somewhere else. And that's amazing because throughout time, when you have a question, when you have an entrepreneur that has a problem or a challenge, being able to reach out to amazing people throughout the world and that they answer you within the next 24 hours is unique. And I think that that's the real people-to-people relationship, not absurd relationship that you think you have because you exchange it 2 words on LinkedIn. Really, human being relationship is still very important. So that's the first basic, of course, advice. I guess that the second one is understanding the VC game. Talking about it a little bit before, I spent a lot of time just being a very focused entrepreneur, reading all these books and being able to talk hours around my product, and I didn't understand enough what the VCs were looking and how VCs were looking to me. And I think that you have to understand that when a VC talks to you, he's going to screen you in a very particular way, and he's going to try to see if you're a leader. If you have communication skills, it's absolutely essential, because if you don't have communication skills, you can't raise thousands and maybe millions of dollars. You can't build an empire, you can't hire, you can't a lot of things. And understanding what the important things that a VC is going to look at is really important in order to, of course, try to stick to it. I guess the team, of course, is essential. The complementary of the team. And what I used to do, and it's maybe basic, but it's just build throughout time a huge FAQ, because you always have the same questions. People are not that creative. They're going to ask again and again the same questions. But the problem is that if you don't find a way to process it, it's going to be so time consuming. So just in a very, you need to process everything and find a way to make your answers more efficient. So I guess that the thing that in common between those advice is to try to find your singularity, your uniqueness, because we're all, of course, very unique. And I think that if you get someone to understand why you're very special, they'll find a way to start the conversation, potentially invest, or potentially have other kind of relationship. But again, we're in a very, automated world, and what I see, and we received last year at Stefan 2000 DEX, and on the 2000 DEX, we invested in 7 companies, and I think the 7 companies, what they have in common is unique founders, not even the product, because when you invest in seed, the product is going to change, obviously, at least 3 or 4 times. What you need to understand is this person a leader? Is this person, even with a bad product, going to find a way through life and through adversity to make the thing happen? And I think that on the 7 companies, each founder is absolutely unique. They come from everywhere in the world. They're often based in France, but they come from everywhere in the world, and they just have this thing that I know the product is not perfect, but I know they'll make it somewhere.
I love all of that, and those are definitely good tips. I would probably add to that. First, how many people are raising? Like, how many people in this room are trying to raise? Okay, yeah. Listen, it is. My heart goes out to everyone. I mean, it's a tough time to fundraise. It's like it's tough to be raising for a fund. It's tough to be raising for a startup. Like it's really, really tough. And so, my answer to the question, look, the people that are getting checks right now, I'm going to describe it kind of from the investor lens and perspective, right? So it is still there are definitely still startups at seed that are getting funded. We are still operating at lower levels than before the pandemic, so we haven't fully recovered. Obviously, we're really, really down from the kind of heady days of 2020, 2021, but we have not yet recovered to seed funding from pre-pandemic. But there are still a lot. I think so far this year, $31 billion or so in seed checks roughly have been written. So it's a lot of money. A lot of that has been AI. And a lot of that has been like 6 big AI deals by the big multi-stage funds, one of which was like Elon's XAI thing. So So there's not only less being spent, but it's also very, very concentrated in AI, and it's concentrated in some like really big, sexy deals. So it really is tough out there to be raising a seed. If it feels, I mean, it's always tough, but if it feels especially tough right now, you are not crazy. It's not because you have, you don't have a great idea. I am sure everyone in this room has a great idea, but it is really tough. So who's actually getting checks? Who's actually getting checks? So the people who are getting checks, obviously, like people who really have a plausible theory, the case of how AI has created a special moment to innovate in the market. They've communicated to the investor and convinced the investor that it's a really sizable market, that even as they go through the iterations, it almost doesn't matter where it iterates, there's enough of a pie there to win. I will often see founders come in and not really know who they're even pitching to. Like they'll just have a misfit and misunderstand that not only do like firms have areas of specialization, but specific partners have areas of specialization. So, so the founders that are getting funded are the ones that really did the homework. And the homework is not only understanding the firm and the partner, the homework is also, this is an industry that is fueled on the back channel. And so if investors are hearing about you from other people, you're more likely to get their attention than if they're hearing about you for the first time from you, right? So, and then there's all the evergreen stuff. I mean, you've got to be able to really tell a powerful story, and they have to believe that you can sell stock, that you can recruit a team, that you're building in a space where you've got real expertise and are building against what you know, that you are innovating not just a product, but they believe that you can get to a $100 million company that's going to give them a 100x outcome, blah, blah, blah. And they want to have to be married to you for the next decade. It's like these are relationships that are harder to get out of in some cases than like real marriages. Like it's easier to divorce than it is to like get somebody off your cap table. So so they want to like sort of be able to look at you as a founder and say, I like you enough to want to be kind of married to you for the duration. And we could like keep going. If it sounds like it's this Byzantine calculus, I mean, there are a lot of variables, but there are a lot of variables because it's harder to get venture funding than it is to get into Harvard. Every check writer is going to be looking at thousands of deals, and they're going to write a number of checks that they can count on a hand. It really is hard, and that is not at all to be discouraging. Like if you are founding something, you already have the courage and the bravery and the intelligence to do it. It's just that you do have to just steel yourself you're going to get a gazillion no's, and you can make it easier to get to a yes if you're really, really strategic and smart about who and how you pitch.
So one of the things that you just did, you asked for a show of hands of who's raising. I raised my hand. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, I'm not, these are questions for you to answer for yourself. Is there a nonprofit that you're involved in? Is there a political candidate or organization that you are passionate about? Is there a nonprofit you should be involved in? And can you be raising money for them? I'm raising money not for a company or fund right now, but for some nonprofits and political things. And fundraising is a muscle. The act of asking someone for money and to invest in your nonprofit, your candidate, your campaign, that is very translatable. And that also takes the edge off of some of the no's. And someone who has invested with you in that context may also be someone who is interested in investing with you in your company or fund. So for instance, and there is like this huge analogy. So when Nicole starts the Orchid Foundation and has to do fundraising for this incredible organization, she is working just as hard to raise money as any founder startup I have ever seen. I know because like I get squeezed, and it's irresistible because the story is so compelling. So I want to tie that to storytelling. I do want to encourage you to think about like if you're in this room and you're not raising money for a nonprofit and you're not raising money for a company or fund, think about raising money for a nonprofit. Nicole's is great. But I want to ask you, how do you tell the story of, Tatiana talked about the uniqueness. How do you communicate that? What are some of the most effective things that you've seen? Because I know you talked about helping people with their pitches, and how do you break through the noise? That was one of the questions the founders in our founder-only session just before this wanted to know how you break through the noise, because there are thousands of decks coming in by email. So what are you guiding people? How do you break through the noise?
Maybe I'll give a pithy answer and then let you. I mean, look, at the end of the day, what you're trying to convince every investor in your story is this is a really exciting market. We have a really strong case for creating a sticky product that addresses and capitalizes on that cool opportunity. And we are the team that has a unique right to go after that opportunity. So that's what you're trying to convey in that story, specifically like an investor pitch. And then from there, it's really just a matter of good storytelling generally, which is you always want to have an element of kind of logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos, are you credible? Are you credible as a founder? Is this a space that you have worked in for X number of years and really understand like what the true, intractable, and acutely felt pains are of the customer that you're going after? Can someone believe in you as the CEO that you're going to be able to sell stock, build a team, et cetera? So that's the logos piece. There is, the credibility is the ethos piece, the market is the logos piece, and then the pathos is really like investors, no offense to the investors in the room, but investing is actually an emotional decision above all. Like there's just, people want to feel like they're going to be missing out on something. You almost want to give them a little bit of FOMO. You want to tap into something sort of deep inside. And so really, really think about how are you telling almost an emotional or arresting story? How are you able to personalize it in some way? Does it come from something in your own personal background? Are you able to personalize to something in the investor in the audience, or who you're pitching to? So, just good basic storytelling, ethos, pathos, logos. And then remember what you're trying to convey is I've picked an amazing market. This is a really timely opportunity. I really know how to create a product that's going to capitalize on this opportunity, and I'm the person to do it. So this is how you know I have kids. This is the alarm to make sure that my 10-year-old gets fed. Wherever she is, I had it right under you. Thank you. Wherever she is. Oh, I hope you're eating, honey.
Wow.
Yeah, she does know. So true. I just want to tell.
Yeah,
so,
please.
So I'm now. I take my daughter to the orthodontist, and and I'm there just kind of quiet. And this is her first visit with him, so he's trying to build rapport. He's like, "Oh, so what do your mom and dad do?" And she goes, "Well, my dad helps like grown-up companies grow, and my mom helps baby companies grow." And he looks up at me and goes, "Venture capital and private equity." I was like, yes. Only in New York, folks. Only in New York.
That would
Great
not
storytelling.
So the question was, because I was fascinated by the answer, so I forgot the question.
And I think we have like a minute left.
We do have like a minute
We're
left.
out of control.
So
So-
yeah, breaking through the noise.
Of course, it's a very hard topic. You need to listen to the music in the noise, which is hard to do. I guess, again, I mean, we're in a weird world where everything is going very quickly, where we're becoming robots, where we don't have enough time. We are very, focused. And I think that at one point, you need, of course, to get your deck right and to get everything right. But you need to find a way to just be unique. I used to spend a lot of time with my artistical friends because I found my business friends a little bit boring, but also because they never understood what I was building, and they helped me kind of having my product become universal in a way, because if they could kind of get excited about it, maybe everybody could, and they had each time a very interesting point of view that wasn't, put red on your slides, but more like find a way to, reach emotions. So I think that maybe sometimes just go pitch your deck to your autistic friends, and if he's not or she's not excited about it, make them help you to find a way to be more exclusive, more unique, and to get people's attention in another way than just, money, money, money.
I love that. Meredith, you want to bring us home?
I'm just like thinking of Elle Woods and Legally Blonde with the Harvard application, right? Because this is harder than getting into Harvard. Thank you so much. This was really a wonderful conversation. I know it'll continue, but before we go for music and conversation, I know we have some smaller group breakouts. I don't know if I know the room assignments. Do I know the room assignments?
Brittany's going to help guide everyone everywhere, and we're gonna say goodbye to the Zoom.
We're going to say
folks.
goodbye to Zoom.
Thank you, Zoom folks. We really appreciate you joining.